afternoon, everyone. This is the Economic Development and Innovation Committee meeting. It's our first meeting of 2021, so Happy New Year. We've got two items on our agenda. First is the community-centered economic development / strategic small business investment, or in simple terms, I like to say corner stores. And the second item is Raleigh's Human Relations Commission Municipal Equality Index Score. And we're going to start with the corner stores initiative first. So I'll turn over to Mr. Green.
Good afternoon, Council Member Melton and members of the ED&I committee. Hope you're all having a great day. Two very interesting items that Council has placed in committee for today. The first item, as Mr. Melton mentioned, community-centered economic development, but Council asked us to really focus on corner stores. Interested in corner stores as ways to address food deserts, support healthy food choices, encourage small-scale retail, and promote more convenient access to healthy foods. Now, this item is consistent with your strategic plan in three areas. I'll mention one in the economic development area. Item 4.3, which Council approved, encourages strategic business investment in areas of the city where the need for that business exists. You're going to hear a little later in the presentation how it relates to a couple other areas in your strategic plan. Today, we put together a team effort to do this presentation. Up first will be Veronica Creech. Veronica is going to talk about food deserts and food swamps and talk about some of the challenges with corner stores. Corner stores are really just one way to get healthy food out into the community, and she's going to talk about some of the city's strategies and partnerships, some of the other things we've done to make sure we're getting healthy food out into the community. Next up will be Pat Young. Council asked about our development ordinance and our comprehensive plan, and if there were any impediments to developing neighborhood retail and corner stores. And really there's not, but Patrick's going to go into more detail. And Patrick's also going to talk about how the city is proactively working on policies for our transit-oriented development to create these retail centers and have easy access to healthy foods. And then the last speakers will be Chief Deck Brown and Bryce Abernathy from our code enforcement area. Council asked about enforcement and concerns about some food stores and how they become enforcement issues and folks don't go and the neighborhoods may not support those corner stores. So the Chief and Bryce are going to get into more of that topic. We're happy to answer any questions along the way. And with that, let me turn it over to Veronica, who will bring up the presentation.
Derek, can you hear me and see the presentation?
Yes, we can hear you, see you.
Perfect. Hey, folks, good to be with you today, Jim. Thank you for that opening. Indeed, we've been doing a lot of cross-departmental work looking at neighborhood retail, one strategy specifically corner stores. There we go. The timing of the topic in these stated goals, the stated goals of addressing food deserts and swamps, encourage neighborhood and micro business, encouraging access to healthy foods is quite timely, as this topic and related goals are in line with the July 2020 rollout of 15-minute city, a concept which amplifies the benefits of communities where everyone can access all of their household needs within a 15-minute walk. Additionally, understanding common language the USDA and Healthcare Without Harm, a national healthy food movement, help us better understand. You heard Jim talk about food deserts and food swamps, and we provided, kind of a common language definition here with when we're familiar with deserts being areas with inadequate access to healthy, affordable food options. And now, according to Healthcare Without Harm, food swamps are characterized as communities that are flooded with unhealthy, highly there are some larger challenges within these areas, so additional ills that often accompany food deserts and food swamps. They're present in both urban and rural areas. These areas usually have lack of reliable transportation. These areas are often plagued with poor diets and related health challenges, for example, obesity and diabetes. Coupled within the conversation, however, of access to healthy food, presence of locally owned neighborhood businesses, and living in a safe and walkable community are all goals of equitable economic development and equitable development overall. We can think about the stated goals from current and creative approaches. For example, City of Raleigh departments have either piloted, tested, or considered some of these ideas when aiming to meet the goals. A few highlights: Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, working with the Office of Sustainability, explored pop-up and mobile fresh markets. The Office of ED&I sponsored the Produce Project, which allowed the organization to expand fresh food delivery into areas that serve low-income senior citizens. Office of Sustainability is currently collaborating on the Wake County Food Security Plan. Our very own RPD hosts annual food distributions, and the city was instrumental in helping the Black Farmers Market have a regular presence at the Rock Quarry YMCA. When looking at corner stores as a strategy to meet the stated goals, there are opportunities and challenges, and that we've learned about these from current neighborhood retail, other communities, and research. We've outlined a few strategic points here. So let's look at a couple of opportunities. We could learn from other cities, and we know that research shows that success trends toward large, dense areas with like 800 to 1,000 residential units within a walking distance of a corner store. We could consider corner stores along City of Raleigh assets like bus rapid transit and station area plans. And of course, in the Office of ED&I, we're working with Raleigh Business Alliances to provide consultation when entrepreneurs and owners want to open or expand neighborhood retail. And within our toolbox, we have the Building Upfit Grant and the Facade Grant, as we want to encourage neighborhood and community retail. At the same time, again, listening to research and experience, some challenges include corner stores have a profit margins that are low or absent with fresh foods. This is often because the fresh food supply chain can be difficult for corner stores. And then oftentimes corner stores will balance low revenue inventory with high margin products. Some corner stores foster negative activities, and some have recorded some code or enforcement issues you'll hear about later with from RPD. But for now, I'm going to turn this over to Pat Young, our Director of Planning and Development Department, who'll dive deeper into a few of these areas, followed by Neighborhood and Housing, and then RPD speaking from local experiences. Pat?
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Jim, for that introduction. Appreciate it. And thank you, Chair Melton and commissioners for having us. As you heard from Veronica, the key to success for a neighborhood grocery or corner store is having a densely populated residential area that's near the store. It's really as simple as that, or that is accessible to the store with high frequency transit. You heard from Veronica using the figure of 800 to 1,000 households needed to support each corner store. That is certainly verified by the research we've done through the Congress for New Urbanism. If you take the assumption, which we certainly do in planning, talking to our community members, most folks will not walk more than about a quarter mile for basic needs unless they don't have a car in the household. So folks that have a car in the household will rarely walk more than a quarter mile. If you assume that quarter mile distance, that's about a 12 units per acre density as kind of a minimum to support a full service neighborhood grocery or corner store. And what I mean there, as Veronica alluded to, is a store that has healthy, fresh food options, similar to the kind of bodega model you see in New York City and cities across the East and Midwest and other parts of the world. So in combination with the density and the high quality transit, we also want to ensure the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure to safely access it. So these are obviously all key planning issues. Next slide, please, Veronica. Fortunately, our comprehensive plan has over a dozen policies that directly and indirectly encourage and support the goal of having more neighborhood scale retail and corner stores. And so there's a really strong existing policy context for this goal. And fortunately, we're working on each of these. If you go to the next slide, please, Veronica. So in terms of the zoning, what's allowable for corner stores today, corner stores are allowed in all of our mixed use districts. The example you see in the picture there on the slide is there at North Street and Glenwood South, where it's a corner store that's in a residential building. That is allowed in the residential mixed use RX in the OX district, and then standalone locations are allowed in CX, DX, NX, and planned development districts. So they are allowed in many locations in the city that meet that density threshold that I talked about earlier. In residential districts such as R4 and R10, many of the locations where there are existing corner stores in South Raleigh and Southeast Raleigh are legal nonconformities because they were established in these districts prior to the prohibition of corner stores in the residential district. So if that's something that you all want to look at, we would need that direction. But most of those corner stores are legally non-conforming and therefore couldn't be expanded or modified significantly. Next slide, please, Veronica. So we wanted to show just a couple of typologies here. This is the Central Mini Mart in Oakwood, the Community Deli in Oberlin. I think these are kind of somewhat platonic ideals of these neighborhood convenient centers that provide both convenient and high quality food, but also that are community meeting places, which is obviously a huge benefit. If you go to the next slide, please, Veronica. A couple other examples. This is one South Raleigh on Haywood Street. And then the Circle K on the right is also has a gas station with it, which is a very common typology in more suburban areas. And again, we would we'd want to get additional direction from you all if you want to see us encourage these even more through our land use policies on design limitations to ensure that it meets your intent of neighborhood context. Many folks don't feel like they don't want a gas station in their neighborhood, but they may want a store that has full service groceries. Next slide, please. And then here's two other examples. Again, the Grocery Board Junior there on Lake Wheeler is kind of a more ex-urban concept that you see in many parts of the city. And then of course a very urban integrated into a residential building at Hillsborough, similar to the one at North in Glenwood that I showed earlier. So again, those are just typologies as we get feedback from you all on what you want to see. We want to make sure we kind of distinguish between these so that we have regulations in place to get the outcomes we want. Next slide, please. So there are a number of project initiatives, some of which we've completed recently, many of which are underway, that we think promotes neighborhood retail and corner stores. The Cottage Court text amendment allows that kind of general incremental density that would support these stores in areas where that zoning exists that I mentioned earlier. Equitable development around transit is a really crucial piece of this puzzle, in our opinion, because it's about really maximizing density and incremental and community sensitive ways around our planned high frequency transit routes and our bus rapid transit routes. So the New Bern area station planning endeavor. Of course, the Dixhead, Edge, and Wakefield plans will look at and consider this, how neighborhood commercial fits in. And then we are also looking at, as you all know, working to support neighborhoods trying to get community gardens and on-site sales, farm stands through a text change that will be coming to you soon. One final item I'll mention here that I have a question mark next to on the slide is accessory commercial units, or ACUs. That's exactly what it sounds like. That's essentially allowing a small portion, usually 20 to 40% of a residential use, to be dedicated to commercial uses. We do have home occupancies for certain types of businesses, but this would kind of expand on that concept. And so that's something that some of our peer cities in the Northwest particularly have done that we could look at if you all have the interest in it. Next slide, please. And as you heard from Jim Green earlier, there are at least 2 other initiatives in addition to the ED&I initiative that we think really closely align, and we'll work with these initiative teams to make sure that this issue gets integrated into their work, which is under growth and natural resources, looking at opportunities to protect and improve environmental resources. So really that's the idea of encouraging urban agriculture and fresh food and available in more locations throughout the community, and a safe, vibrant, healthy communities that's working with community partners to implement and support strategies that enhance food security. So that would, I think, very closely align with this. Next slide. My final slide is just to emphasize, as I've said a couple times now, that our the work you're going to see primarily coming the remainder of this fiscal year and next year is around our equitable development around transit and the BRT corridors. We think that these are the locations that are perfectly designed to support a neighborhood scale retail, and we're going to be very intentional as we do public engagement and we do stationary planning to make sure that those opportunities are available. So with that, I'll certainly be available to answer any questions you all have. With that, I'll turn it over to Bryce Abernathy with Housing and Neighborhoods for some more information.
Well, thank you, Pat, and good afternoon. I wanted to talk to you just for a minute about public nuisance code enforcement and how that pertains to the identified corner stores. Some things that we have run across in the past and that we could address from a request or inspectors out in the field identifying these areas. We would look at things like a concentration of grass over 8 inches in height, any things like mattresses, tires, garbage, or trash in and around these areas, or junk appliances and furniture. With that being said, we do have very few complaints or a history of code violations at these identified corner stores. But if the picture to the right kind of gives you an example of kind of some of the stuff we would look for. But with that, I just have one quick slide, and I'm going to pass it over to Chief Deck Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Bryce. Throughout this multifaceted presentation, you've had various examples and images of the corner store. Each image undoubtedly offered a different and unique individual perspective as to what has been discussed by the various presenters. While we may discuss this visual and the optical impact, it is important to know that some of the lesser dense areas, we really are referencing convenience stores, more so than the ideal corner store, as perhaps one was referenced in the photo here. By their very definition, convenience store is the retail outlet that sells a limited range of prepared or ready-to-eat foods, bottled and fountain beverages, some basic household staples, tobacco products, magazines, alcohol, newspapers, and fuel. Convenience stores are typically small in size and are open for extended hours, and in most cases are staffed by rather small team members, cashiers, stock clerks, as well as managers. And while there can be a significant difference between convenience stores and these stores, the corner store, you're also taking a look at the convenience. And because convenience stores are often open late at night, early in the morning, and on holidays, many people really do rely on them for the emergency items such as the milk, the ice, the eggs, the over-the-counter medications, particularly when stores are closed, when other stores are closed. So from gas to juice, we have all probably had to rely on such an establishment simply out of convenience. Next slide, please. For this presentation, I have offered some information regarding the types of calls for service that we have received at convenient or corner stores, the current corner store locations that we have throughout the city, more specific to the 5 council districts. And as you can see from the current list, for the most part, the incidents were similar with the exception of District A, which did not have assaults in its top 3. It did have assaults, but it did not have assaults in the top 3 ranking calls for service. Instead, it had credit card and ATM fraud. And while the specific names of the stores are not noted, most would fit into your traditional category of what comes to mind when we reference the corner store or the convenience store as we know it today in our city. And as we address this topic and the other factors that are directly or indirectly related to the issue, we are talking about some of the issues that do ultimately and unfortunately impact and adversely impact quality of life. And in many instances, that is indeed the case. When referencing the city's strategic plan, these issues further impact real and perceived safety. Just this past week alone, on Friday, we had 2 people shot outside of a convenient corner store. Next slide, please. We do recognize that the topic here and the discussion about food and quality food is indeed a priority and is a major concern for many families throughout our city, as well as the impact of COVID and people not working. We too have been very much involved in some of those community efforts to further ensure that families throughout our community are indeed getting some food. The Raleigh Police Department collaborated with faith-based, governmental, and other community-based organizations to conduct basically 116 food and mass distribution events throughout the city last year. And just in the past week, we partnered with one of the community churches in the area and we've been doing that for numerous weekends with that particular church in Southeast Raleigh. At the onset of COVID last year, once the schools closed, we saw this type of community effort for food distribution and our opportunity to participate increase. And what we also saw was, because particularly elementary schools where Backpack Buddies programs are very significant, there was that gap for that moment. And so where there were opportunities for our personnel, and even more specifically, our youth and family services officers, those who are teaching in the elementary schools, and our SROs began to partner with other members of the greater community to assist in those overall food distribution and drive-through events, where basically the trunk is opened or the rear compartment of the vehicle, and we're basically placing boxes of food and other household needs in that vehicle. In 2020, the Raleigh Police Department hosted several food distribution events along with the Food Bank of North Carolina and many other community partners. Just in 2 of those events, and that is the event that took place at Southeast Raleigh High School, as well as the more recent event towards the end of the year was at Biltmore Hills Community Center in their parking lot area. And of those 2 events, the net food totals, as well as for families, yielded 3,419 families and 113,762 pounds of food were distributed through those two events. And that just speaks to one, the opportunity to distribute food. And we also distributed masks during those events as well in order to further prevent the spread of the virus also. And so we see that there's a significant need, and where there are opportunities, we have truly partnered, but we are also asked on a frequent basis by those other entities in the community who too see a need, be it faith-based or otherwise, to participate. And so we have done that and continue to do that throughout 2021 as well. So that concludes my presentation, and for closing and questions, I will turn this over back to our Assistant City Manager, Jim Green.
Thank you, Chief. And Mr. Melton, our team is here, happy to answer any questions. Real proud of the work the team did in a short time when this was assigned to the committee. So I appreciate city staff's work. You can see the information from the development code as well as the comprehensive plans and things Pat went over that are encouraging the stores and community retail, and appreciate Chief and Bryce going over some of the concerns and some of the issues on the enforcement and trying to balance those as well. But we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks. I know we had, I think, at least one person join who had signed up for public comment, but I believe Mr. Smith is trying to coordinate with them. So we may circle back on one public comment. In the meantime, I have some comments and questions, but I'm happy to save them for the end of this topic if any of the other council members want to jump in with anything. Councilmember Knight.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. I think one, going back to the zoning slide, and I think maybe Patrick would be the best person to talk about this or answer this. I am interested in the idea of these type of stores, facilities not being allowed in any of the R districts that don't have mixed use attached to them. So I think that's something we may want to look at and see if other cities our size or larger are actually allowing them or thinking of other creative ways to allow them, as well as the and why they're allowed in the well, anyway, and then also the ACUs. I think that may be another way to go about looking at this in more residential or sort of the historical residential neighborhoods. But I think there is something there that you know, I think we should think about or look at why we're not allowing these in the more traditional or spread out residential areas. So I think that's something to look at. And then, and one of the things that, you know, we could look at is limit these type of stores to, you have to provide a certain percentage of your, you know, of your revenue has to be by providing food. So it wouldn't become, you know, you may not allow a liquor store in one of these areas, but you would allow a type of store that has a certain percentage of sales of food, and it may even be fresh food. If we want to, by, you know, part of dealing with the swamp issue. And then Chief Deck Brown, I appreciate your comments at the end there. And I think that goes to, is sort of a, not directly on topic, but this evolution of our police force and policing in general with this engagement and interaction with our citizens and residents in different ways, and not sort of the way that a lot of people think that it only has to be when there's some sort of event happening that they need to check on. So I appreciate that, and I think that kind of thinking will go a long ways as we move forward in thinking about how our police force evolves into the future and the interaction engagement with our residents. So I appreciate that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Branch.
All right, mouse was acting up on me. Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation. I have a couple questions and also some comments. First, as far as the number of corner stores per district, can that information be provided? Because I would like to look at that along with the police data that we have to see how that balances out as far as, you know, the activities. But I do know, based upon personal knowledge, to go to Councilor Knight's question about residential areas, I know there's a history of we've had to close some of these stores because of a number of reasons, from code violations to nuisance to public safety. And this closure was at the request of individuals in the community. So I think having that information, that history, needs to be at the forefront of any existing policy and procedures that we have or we're looking to change or modify. I say that too with my question, which is around, based upon our challenges that we've seen in opportunities, instead of us looking at this from adding new corner stores right away or the ability to add, what are some opportunities to help improve existing ones so that they are better stewards in their community? Because I think the last thing I want to do is add to some underlying challenges that I know are in my district. But I think if we could come up with tools and vehicles to help some of these existing owners. And it goes to the policy that Councilor Knight stated, you know, selling so much towards fresh produce instead of, you know, other commodities. You know, what can we be done legally? And that would go to Brandon's lane of what can we say legally they can sell or can't sell in order to be compliant. I said a lot, so I'll be quiet right there and let you all provide some feedback.
Mr. Branch, thank you. I'm happy to start, and I think the chief and really several folks may want to participate in answering this. Certainly, there's some opportunities to help businesses improve economic development, and Veronica will probably want to jump in. She mentioned some of the grant programs we have, working also closely with our alliances and reaching out and building relationships and connections with businesses, not only corner stores, but other small business, and how can we help them improve and address some of the concerns that we may be hearing about. So Veronica and her team are taking an active role in that. And I think some programs in place to provide some financial assistance. I'll let the chief and maybe Pat get into more with the requirements as far as the store selling healthy food. That's the goal. That's what we want. I think that's what the neighborhood wants. There's issues with that. We've just discussed the economics and the higher profit margin on other items that lead stores to take shelf space from healthy food and replace it with items that maybe provide higher profit for the store. The other thing is access to some of that healthy food. A grocery store buying in bulk may have more access than a corner store. So there's some economic and some supply chain issues as well. On the enforcement side, I'll turn it over to the chief I think she has some thoughts on those items that are sold and the restrictions on that.
I do want to just, first of all, just thank Mr. Knight for his comment, but I would say as the Raleigh Police Department, our efforts really do speak to probably more innovative and non-traditional policing at times. So this just kind of falls right in sync with some of the stuff that we've been doing for years, but thank you for recognizing that. To Mr. Branch's request really is what I was gonna ask about. Councilor Branch, you asked for data that was specific to the district. So are we talking police districts or are we talking council districts? I know that I presented it for your interest on this site from a council district setting, so you could kind of have a different connection, but yeah. I just need to know what
to be
data
to be consistent, we'll say council, even though I know I have 3 police districts just in my district alone, with Central and Southeast being the bulk of it. But I think just for this presentation, we'll do council district to make it easy.
Okay, we'll take care of that. Jim, I really did not have any specifics regarding what people can sell or not sell. I think that's, we can definitely look into that. I know that there are opportunities for conversation with, particularly if it relates to ABC and some other things, I'm sure with ABC and ALE and other entities along that regard. But I really don't have anything to offer in regards to other restrictions that can or cannot be placed.
Mr. Young, I see the mayor's hand is up, Mr. Young, and then I have some points as well. So, Mr. Young, were you going to respond to Councilmember Branch's question?
Thank you, Chair Melton. Yeah, I was just going to really respond quickly to both Councilmember Knight and Councilmember Branch's comments. We certainly can look at and explore and bring you all options in terms of expanding or modifying the allowance of these uses. We also can look at within the bounds of legality. Of course, we'll have to work with our attorney's office. We can kind of create new categories of uses that are, not traditional convenience stores that do specify the percentage of sales from, non-alcohol sales or something along those lines. If that's legal to do, I honestly don't know, and we'll just need to consult our attorneys and get back to you ASAP. My big concern, and I want to just emphasize it quickly, is I do feel confident. There's a lot of good research on this that, below that about 12 units an acre threshold, we can allow it as much as we want. It's probably not going to be economically viable as a standalone use. Most of our suburban neighborhoods are 3 to 5 units an acre, so less than half of that threshold. So I would just encourage us to really focus on areas where we're making transit investments and encouraging higher densities, and that's where we're going to have the best outcomes. But we'll certainly continue to explore other options, things like accessory commercial units that allow very small scale, low cost, high benefit locations or warrant further exploration. Thank you.
Mayor, did you have a comment? Muted. You're not used to being the one that's on mute.
No, I've been struggling today with the mute. So anyhow, I was interested in this whole ACU concept. Can you give some specific examples of what might emerge from something like that?
Sure. So the most developed program that I'm aware of in the United States is Portland, Oregon. They allow up to, I believe it's 25%, and maybe a little more, a little less, of any residential unit to be have a whole wide range of commercial uses. Not the entire range, but essentially retail type uses, as long as all other codes and standards are met, right? So there is some reduction on off-site parking. So on-street parking is permissible for these. up to certain square footage threshold. But what you see in Portland is, little 300 and 400 square foot micro stores that maybe sell, that work with 2 or 3 farmers and kind of distribute produce, kind of like the Produce Project does here in town, and also sells fresh food, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. They're not even usually open more than 2 or 3 days a week, but essentially it's really micro scale retail, and they have certainly have had some success. There's also been some complaints, as you might imagine, from some neighbors. So we can bring you more information on that.
It's just intriguing to me, but I'm not saying I think it would work here, but I'd like a little more information. The second question I have, there's been a lot of talk about, just making the numbers work for these types of stores. Have we ever considered, say, a pilot program where we could set up a model and say, this is how it works? So we would help support or maybe kick that off with ED funding, perhaps, whatnot, but set up a model that works in a way that works in a place that works. I guess that would be for Veronica.
Thank you, Mayor. So we've not talked about a pilot, but what the examples we saw today, we probably have some good places to start benchmarking. Like, let's look at some of the corner stores that we already have. Let's see what's working and what's not. And when we talk about what's working, what do I mean by that? Is it how much fresh foods are sold? Is it the profit margin of the owner? The number of folks that could walk or visit the location? I live in Southeast, and I know that one of the pictures there was the mini mart in Oakwood. That's a well-dense, very walkable area. I'm not sure, what they would report as a success compared to the shop we saw there on Glenwood. So we've got some places we can benchmark if that's of interest.
Okay. And then my third question follows up really, I guess, what Councilor Branch has said. During my tenure on the council, we did have to shut down a number of these stores, but they were, I would label them convenience stores. Most of them their sole purpose was to sell alcohol. And we had a lot of gang activity around there and problems and issues. How can it, I think, Pat, you said that we could talk to the city attorney's office to look how we could structure something like that. What I would also say is maybe if our rules, if we can't do it legally, could we look at potentially going to the legislature if that was required, or just changing some of our rules, if that would make sense.
We'll certainly consult the attorney's office on that. I think we need to identify impediments if we're going to explore this issue further. So we'll bring you back some information on kind of best practice and on legal options. Okay,
thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Knight, I see your hand up, and then I'd like to jump in with some closing questions too. So go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you. That just brought something else to mind, was the kind of furthering this conversation about ACUs along is sort of micro farmers markets in, some of our neighborhood parks, even, I don't know, along greenways, probably not, but, in our neighborhood parks in other parts of the town than just, the downtown area, possibly. I think other cities have done that as well. And I think that's maybe, I know there's oversight and regulations involved with that, but that maybe that's something for us to look into as well. And I hope we do when we talk about corner stores for sure, but also convenience stores, is separating them from gas stations. I think that concept needs to be separated for now on. I don't see us building any new or many gas stations in the city limits, but certainly that should not hinder us creating some more opportunities for convenience stores that go to what we want them to do and sell. Thank you.
Yeah, so in closing, I had a couple things. When I raised this topic, I've been talking about it for a little while. When I asked to send it to committee, I had a couple folks reach out to me and say, I love this idea, but I'm afraid to go to the corner store or the convenience store that's already in my neighborhood. And so I think that the safety issue and the crime issue and the enforcement issue is going to continue to be a problem. But I want to look at this as sort of a yes and. So what I want to do is see how we can clean up some of the unintended negative consequences associated with some of the stuff that's already on the ground, but then move forward with this idea of building that 15-minute city and putting goods and services closer to people so you don't need a car, so that we're working to address some of these food desert type situations. And so I don't want the sort of bad actors and the fear aspect of it prevent us from moving forward with progress. And so I think we can, on two streams, address both. At least I hope we can. That would be my goal. With regard to the moving forward with this initiative, it was interesting to me because I think there was a comment about here are some ideal examples of neighborhood convenience stores. They provide high quality food. They're a meeting center. And I'm struck because I think a lot of those would not be able to be built right now based on our existing code. I think they predate the code. And I think that's a problem. I'm also interested in seeing what we can do about exploring allowing these types of businesses in the residential zoning districts, because I'm not sure we're really going to accomplish our goals if we continue to prohibit it in the R zoning districts. I did some quick math, which has gotten me in trouble at a council meeting before because I'm not good at math. But there was a comment that you really need to be within a quarter mile of the store for it to work. And a quarter mile is about 160 acres. So for R4, that would be 640 units. So that falls below that 800 to I think the 1200 threshold. But certainly like R6, R8, R10, that would fit in on a quarter mile. That fits in, the population density that we're talking about. So I would like to look at, the one in Oakwood, for example. There's one down the street from me that all of my neighbors walk to. And so I would like to look at options for allowing this in the residential zoning, maybe not R4, but maybe R6, R8, R10. And see what that would look like, maybe even like a map of the city. The accessory commercial units, I think, is a great idea also, but I almost see that as a supplemental option because it basically, from what I understand, is it's a portion of a residence that's being used in part for commercial. The examples that were put up were freestanding little commercial centers, like the little tiny cube that sells the, you can take away hot meals, you can go for produce, some of them, maybe you can grab some beer, but not all of it. And so I would like to move forward with figuring out how we can place goods and services closer to people where they are. There was a list, I think, with check boxes and a question mark. I would like to go ahead and continue with everything on that list, and then add to it, maybe if we could get more information on ACUs and options for allowing this in the R zoning districts, maybe R6 and up. I mean, if you think you could do it in R4, fine, but just some options for our next meeting. Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, you just made me think about something too. Can we reach out to the county and see what challenges maybe there from a health department, if there are any? I know we deal with the legislation part of it's legal and you can do it, but there still may be a health requirement or something that may prevent it. I don't know, but I figure if we could just at least ask and reach out, I think is good. And then again, like I said, work with the ones that we have, try to find ways to improve and improve the environment around them as well, as we've had some challenges with one recently. So those are the things that I will continue to try to push. So I believe we can do an and. It just has to make sure that the and makes sense as we move forward. And I like residential, but I like it probably more R10, from that standpoint. And Councilor Knight, there was someone who called me about a month ago about adding a new gas station on a transit corridor. And I've kind of hopefully redirected them, but gas stations are looking to come to Raleigh. just hopefully not the one like going to Orange County.
Did we provide enough direction to everyone on the call who's much smarter on these issues than we are? Do we need to vote on anything, or could we come back and follow up with some of these points we've raised?
Mr. Melton, what I'm hearing, and thank you, this is good discussion, good questions from the committee. What I'm hearing is the desire to leave this topic in the committee, and sounds like additional information needs to be provided, and primarily, and Pat can jump in here, Mr. Melton, you mentioned that checklist, and we can give updates, but in particular, I'm hearing about looking at corner stores, retail in residential zoning districts, more discussion on that, and then the ACUs, more discussion on that. I also heard some requests for data that we can provide. I know Mr. Branch asked for some information, and the desire to look at not only creating new stores, but how can we improve those stores that we have now. And yes, Mr. Branch, I think we can follow up with the county, no issue there. So if that clarifies it, if there's any more information, please let me know.
I think I would add one more thing about the legal options. Let's say if we were to add to residential districts or in general, what ability do we have to regulate what is provided in these stores?
Sure. And city attorney's on the line. I see him shaking his head, and Pat had mentioned that as well. So we'll coordinate with city attorney's office as well. If there's anything else to be added, please let us know.
Jim, I don't know if this needs to be added, but it was stated, can City of Raleigh parks have many farmers markets? Don't know if that was a statement or a question.
Question, please.
Yeah, we'll add that to the list too, Mr. Knight, and follow up on that one. Thank you, Veronica.
Okay, are we good with this agenda item? We can move on to the next, or does anybody have anything else?
Did we ever get the person that had called in? Do you know?
We've resolved that. There's been varying levels of wanting to speak and not wanting to speak, and I think everybody is now not wanting to speak. So we're good.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, so we will move on then to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to add, it may take us a little time to pull this information together. So, Mr. Melton, I don't know if it'll be ready for the next ED&I committee, but if you're okay, I'll coordinate that with you as you set the agenda.
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, well, and the next item we have is the Human Relations Commission Municipal Equality Index Score.
Yes, sir. And is Dr. Caesar on the call yet?
I am on the call. I just need to be promoted to panelist, please.
Okay, we'll work on that, and I'll do a quick intro. First of all, some of the folks will be getting off the call from the first item. Again, I appreciate all city staff's hard work on that first item. Same with this item. Dr. Caesar is here to talk about the MEI scoring index, and she has really taken the lead on this program over the past couple years, working with different departments. Council directed this item to the committee as well, and in working with Dr. Caesar, we felt it was important to remind the committee about the index itself, the requirements, the points, talk about other cities. We thought it was important to benchmark and to talk about some opportunities to improve over the coming year on the index. One thing that Dr. Caesar is also going to point out, there are a lot of good things the city is doing, programs, services to help the LGBTQ community. It's the right thing to do. We are going to continue to look at these opportunities, but unfortunately, we don't get points for that as part of the index. So she's going to share some of that information just to give you a taste of some of the things that we're doing that are above and beyond the index. So we thought it was important to share that as well. So with that, Dr. Caesar, appreciate your leadership on this issue, and we'll turn it over to you.
Can everybody see the presentation? Yes.
I can, yes. I can't see everybody else's faces.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
I think we're okay.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Dr. Audrey Caesar with the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and I'm going to share some information about the Municipal Equality Index. So the MBI examines how inclusive municipal laws and policies and services are of the LGBT community for the community who live and work here in Raleigh. So cities are rated based upon non-discrimination laws, the municipality as an employer, laws, law enforcement, and then the city's leadership. So the index happens annually. And during the months of June and July, we submit data to the Human Rights Campaign. They score it, and we get a report typically in November or early December, which tells us where we stand as a city. Nationwide, cities are prioritizing equality, and that's evidenced by the data. So the national city score average jumped from 64 points to 60, from 60 last year. Raleigh is at the national average of 64 points. Every region in the country saw a mean city score increase this year, with the exception of New England, which maintained its 2019 average. The baseline keeps changing. So every few years, the MEI is adjusted and new measures are added and removed as appropriate. 35 municipalities have what is called anti-conversion therapy ordinances in states with no state level protections, which is up from 28 last year. And just to give you an idea of what conversion therapy is, it's an attempt to change a person's sexual identity or gender expression. These methods and approaches are extremely harmful and highly ineffective. So Raleigh's score is trending up. If you look at the scores from 2018 to 2020, you can see that we've gone from 52 points to 64. Now, if you look at January, or you look at 2016 to 2017, you can see that our scores were 59 and 60. You might be thinking that, hey, we actually went down before we went up. But in actuality, the scores changed. The scoring metrics and the index itself changed in 2018. So with the adjusted measures, we started back at 52, but we're still trending up. This slide shows a comparison of cities. So the city with the highest score is Chapel Hill with 86 points, followed by Greensboro with 79, and then Raleigh at 64. If we look at the scoring here, and over the next few slides, I'm going to go through the specific scoring per section, which will make more sense. But we had a couple of opportunities in municipal services, law enforcement, and then the municipality as an employer. So I'm going to go through and show you exactly where those opportunities are. Here are the 5 sections of the index. Part 1 deals with non-discrimination laws. Part 2 is the municipality as an employer. Part 3 is municipal services. We have law enforcement, and then leadership on LGBTQ equality. Moving into the standards for credit, the first section is non-discrimination laws, and this section is worth 30 points. So you have enforceable non-discrimination ordinance that covers sexual orientation and gender identity specifically for private employment, housing, and public accommodations citywide. Bonus points are available if there is an all-gender single occupancy facility, and then we mentioned conversion therapy before. We can get extra points if we have an ordinance that protects youth from this. The second section, municipality as an employer, is 28 points. And this is looking at non-discrimination protection for employees. The city must have a non-enforceable or an enforceable non-discrimination ordinance or policy that expressly applies to all municipal employees. This section looks at the efforts to ensure LGBTQ employees feel protected and have a safe and effective work environment. Section 3, Municipal Services, 12 points. This section assesses the efforts of the city to ensure LGBTQ community members are included in programs and services. So they're really looking to see if you have a Human Relations Commission, which we do, and then also having an LGBTQ liaison in the city manager's office. Section 4, Law Enforcement. This section looks at the fair enforcement of the law to include responsible reporting of hate crimes and engaging with the LGBT community in a thoughtful and respectful way. So the MEI is requesting that the city have a designated liaison from the police department to the LGBTQ community whose designation and contact information is on the police department's website. Another option is having a police task force charged with addressing LGBTQ issues and elevating those issues to the chief. Points were also awarded, which we received, for reporting hate crime statistics to the FBI. Section 5 is leadership on LGBTQ equality. And this is really about elected officials and appointed officials' position on specific statements or pro-equality legislative or policy efforts. And we're actually given bonus points if we have openly LGBTQ elected officials or appointed officials within the city. So I'm going to shift to opportunities from the 2020 index. Raleigh has already or is on track to accomplish some of these items over the next few months. So we're expecting that the 2021 index will have a higher score, and these are the items that we're going to be pointing to. The first is the Executive Director of Equity and Inclusion will serve as the LGBTQ liaison to allow for the responsibilities of the liaison and the requests from the public to be evaluated. So right now, we don't know how many requests are coming in because we've never put it out there. So my office, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, takes complaints from residents for a variety of reasons. We get civil rights requests. We get fair housing complaints and issues. By allowing us to put this on the website and to open up the door for the LGBT community, we're going to see just how many concerns come through our human relations inbox. We have a dedicated phone line and a dedicated email for these types of requests. So being able to put this on the website and open it up to the LGBT community will allow us to maintain those points or to get those points for 2021. The second one is the implementation of the new required equity training for all staff. In 2020, the city manager mandated that we have equity training across the board. And we've had a team who's been working with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity over the past year, which actually just concluded today, to create and implement this training. We have an equity team of over 40 representatives from a variety of departments within the city who have been trained on these issues and want to be a part of delivering that training. So that's going to happen at the end of February, early March in 2021, where we're going to start the process of training every single city staff person. Thirdly, adding the city's funding of programs to prevent homelessness during COVID, including partnerships with Wake County and Legal Aid of North Carolina, will also add to our opportunities to get credit. Additionally, we still have our human services grants. And so if we have grantees over this next year that have dedicated some of their services to preventing homelessness, and specifically with the LGBT community, we can obtain points that way. Also, for Part 2D, Inclusive Workplace, our Human Resources Department is working to create programming to attract applicants and promote diversity in the workplace. Our Human Resources Director, Megan Stackhouse, has shared with us that they're in the process of vetting the feasibility of doing an employee resource group for the LGBT community. They have an employee group now that is in the process of creating a survey. And once they release the survey, we're going to see if employees agree that this is necessary and something that they would support and do. The LGBTQ inclusive diversity training for all city staff happens twice now. It always happens at orientation. So when you're a new employee, you always have the opportunity to be trained. But now with the mandated equity training, employees will be trained twice. Also, Human Resources is working on a recruitment program that actively advertises positions to the LGBT community, and they're looking at all facets of equity in the hiring process. What the index does not capture. The City of Raleigh has a variety of programs that we want to share, and we just want to let the community know that we're doing a lot in this space. But unfortunately, we aren't able to get points from the Human Rights Campaign. The first being the Talk Inclusion series put on by the Office of Equity Inclusion. One of our next sessions is actually going to be presented by the LGBT Center of Raleigh, and they're going to do 2 sessions, a session for staff and a session for the community, which is just really an overview on some of the issues facing the LGBT community here in Raleigh, and then some opportunities and solutions. The Social Equity Book Club, Real Queer America, LGBTQ Stories from Red States was one of our most popular book clubs in 2020. And we had over 25 folks on the call, and usually when the call is that big, we need to schedule an encore. So possibly in 2021, we might have another encore from this particular group. We always ask for authors and guest facilitators to come in who have expertise in the area that they're speaking from. And again, we had Lindsay Lugis from the LGBT Center to facilitate that discussion. The Economic Development and Innovation Department has been sponsoring LGBTQ business events with the LGBTQ Chamber, and they host an annual business expo, which was, I think, canceled this past year due to COVID, but will be up again in the following year. Just the ongoing networking with the LGBTQ Chamber, and then advocating for the LGBTQ businesses within Raleigh City Services. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things that the city is actively doing around engagement for the LGBT community and trying to make this a more inclusive and welcoming environment. So at this point, I will take questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything from council members? Mayor?
I have a question, Dr. Caesar, you mentioned adding a number of these programs. We're currently in the process of doing that. How much does that improve our score?
Specifically for points, I'm actually going to jump to my slides and I can give you an actual number. Give me 1 second here. Okay. As it relates to municipal services, we had 15 points out of a possible 22. So I think I'm pretty sure that if we do the education piece, which is the mandated training, and the recruitment piece, we're going to get all the points there, and also municipality as an employer. So we're looking at our score going up to approximately 80, between 80 and 82, depending on the bonus, if we're awarded bonus points for that.
Councilmember Branch.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the report. And one thing I just want us to keep in mind that continue to do things because it's the right thing to do. Because as we know, the scores and ratings, they change. And if there's ways to be innovative and do things, as we saw, we're doing things that aren't even scored. I think that's what we should continue to do in the messaging, and just realize that even this community is not monolithic. It's very diverse internally, and making sure that we're still able to reach other aspects of these people's lives in the city and in the community as well. So, but thank you for all the work in presenting this information.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yeah, one thing I have gotten questions about is the non-discrimination ordinance. And I just want to say that we did take an approach on our non-discrimination ordinance. We updated and approved our longstanding non-discrimination ordinance. We also created something that was legal and enforceable. And I think that that's important to keep in mind as we continue to have this discussion. That's all.
Yeah, I'll just add that, first of all, I'm glad we're looking at this. I agree that it's important to do things because it's the right thing to do. And we're doing things that aren't even being captured on this metrics. Part of the reason why I sent this issue to ED&I is because this metrics is produced and employers look at it, and folks who may want to relocate to Raleigh look at it. So doing things because of the right things to do and going above and beyond is good. And then also making sure that we're meeting these metrics so that we can send the right message as well is good. And so I'm glad that we're working on this. I hope that future councils will continue to do this exercise every year. I think the suggestions that you've made for improving the score are good. And so hopefully we'll get those implemented. Touching on the mayor's comments about the non-discrimination laws, we've had one as an employer, as a city employer for a long time. What we're seeing now is this discussion in the private sector about public accommodations. You'll notice that it's ranked by state, county, and municipal. So the city, the county, and the state all sort of play a hand in that conversation. It's something that I hope we follow suit in. I know we're looking at it and talking about it, and we want to make sure that anything Raleigh does is going to be enforceable and also furthers the cause and doesn't have any unintended negative consequences. And so that's a conversation that something I'm going to continue working on. And I'd like to also continue to work with our county partners as well, because they play a role in this issue as well. But as far as the sort of immediate, directly within our influence as it relates to us as an organization, the items that Dr. Caesar has brought up, I'd like to just go ahead and let's move forward with all those right now. I don't know if we need to vote on that or if we just need to signal that that's the right direction.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations that Dr. Caesar brought forward in terms of implementation.
Okay, the mayor made a motion, Councilmember Branch seconded. I'm seeing other hands by Mr. Green and Councilmember Knight.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say these things that Dr. Caesar mentioned as opportunities, we're already in the process of implementing. We saw them as administrative, and you heard her, even our previous city manager on the training implemented that program and working with Dr. Caesar. So certainly appreciate council's support coming out of this. I just wanted everyone to know that we're already working on these things and making progress on them.
I think it was an important statement, though, for us to make as a group that we are committed to this, and I'd like to see everybody vote on it.
Okay.
We have a second.
Right, so we have a second by Councilmember Branch. All in favor? Opposed? None. Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, and I may have missed this, Dr. Caesar, but there seems to be where we are scoring a little bit lower in some places that they basically said what you can do to get those scores up, and there's some opportunities there. And I hope we continue to look at all the opportunities. Law enforcement brings up, I don't think you mentioned about what we're doing as an opportunity within law enforcement. It sounds like they laid that out pretty clearly, and it seems like that's something we could look into doing to raise those scores across the board. So I hope we continue to do look at all the opportunities that we have to raise our score. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with Councilmember Knight. There's a lot more work to do, but this is, I think, I hate to use it this way, but the sort of the immediate stuff that we can be moving on, that staff's already moving on. Let's go ahead and get that done, and we got some more work to do as well. Anything else for today? No? All right. With that, Mayor?
I just wanted to thank the staff for all they've done on both of the issues that were before the committee today. You might have heard we had a very lengthy and intense housing committee meeting. So today actually was a good day. We covered a lot of ground. I just want to thank you and tell you you're appreciated.
Mayor, thank you for that, and thought it was a good committee meeting. Anything else that we can do to help, please let us know, and we'll continue to work on the corner store item to bring that to a future committee meeting.
All right, with that, then we're good to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.